Good afternoon, everyone. This is the regularly scheduled meeting of the Ways and Means Committee. I'm John Quincy, the chair, joined by council members Yang, Palmisano, Andrew Johnson, and Council Vice President Elizabeth Glidden. We have 20 items on our agenda today, the first 19 of which are on our consent agenda. So allow me to just run through those really briefly, and then we'll get to our discussion item. The first three items are from the City Attorney's Office. They represent one contract amendment, a settlement of litigation, and a signing on as an amicus brief in the case of Fredericks versus the California Teachers Association. City Coordinator brings forward a building use contract with the Minneapolis American Indian Center. Finance Department brings forward the third quarter gift acceptance for 2015, a contract for investment consultant services with H.H. Elwood Associates. And the Health Department brings forward the Minneapolis High Rise Representative Council. This is authorizing an agreement with the High Rise Representative Council in a amount not to exceed $80,000 to prevent and manage chronic diseases for high-rise residents. We also have from the Community Development Regulatory Services Committee the Seward Tower Renovation Project, 2910 East Franklin and 2515 South 9th Street. We also have the passage of resolution on the appropriation of 2.5 of contingency funds for the Affordable Housing Trust Fund as approved in the 2015 budget, and then approval of a total of $8,859,113 from the Affordable Housing Trust Fund for a number of projects related to the trust fund awards. From the Public Safety, Civil Rights, and Emergency Management Committee, we have the bomb security services for Timberwolves basketball games for 2015-2016 season. And from the Transportation Public Works Committee, we have the cleaning and lining of cast iron water mains contract amendment, the execution of an engineering services agreement for the Fridley Softening Plant Recarbonization System Improvements Project. We have the Downtown Pedestrian Improvement Project. That's an agreement with MnDOT. We have the hydraulic modeling contract. That's a contract with Barr Engineering Company. We have a master partnership contract with MnDOT Amendment and the Hennepin-Lindale Sanitary Sewer Improvements Project contract amendment, and then a reconstruction street lighting project, postponement of assessments for 8th Street, Southeast Street reconstruction project. We have authorizing an execution of agreement with the Walker Art Center. This is for the Vineland Place feasibility study, and a bid for Special Service District snow removal services. This is accepting the low bid from Stone Pros LLC. Are there any comments or questions on those 19 items? Council Vice President Glidden.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I wanted to remove the Affordable Housing Trust Fund item for a couple questions. It's not so much on the projects that are recommended, but I wanted a refresher, probably from Ms. Christensen, on where the contingency fund funding for the Affordable Housing Trust Fund was taken from, and whether all of that amount that is moved to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund is needed, and where that leaves the fund where it was taken from.
Okay. Any other questions or comments, and we can get to that one? Councilmember Yang? We'll pull that for a little bit of discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a minor correction on item number 6. It says contract for investments consultant services with H&H Elwood Associates, and then it keeps on going to J&H, and I think the correction is J&H all the way through, not
Okay.
H&H.
We'll make sure that is corrected. That I see Ms. Giesler saying that will be addressed in the from the clerk's department. Thank you for that. Let's go ahead, Councilmember Palmisano.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to comment briefly on number 18. That's the Vineland Place feasibility study. I just want to make it clear that this ties this is a study to do some work next year, and there's money in our proposed 2016 budget that I'm not yet fully comfortable with, but I am happy that the Walker's eager to look at options here. I'm happy that they're looking to do this feasibility study and willing to reimburse us the amount. So I'll be supporting this, but I'm not yet comfortable with the whole project
Gotcha.
today. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, let's go ahead and take a quick vote on the consent items except for the Affordable Housing Trust Fund awards of item number 9. All those in favor of those items, with the exception of number 9, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Those items carry forward. And I wonder if we could get to Council Vice President's question, Ms. Christensen, and we also have Mr. Clevenger and others to respond as well.
Thank you, Chair Quincy. Council Vice President Glidden, in response to your question, the $2.5 million being requested as part of this action is the result of an action taken during the 2015 budget adoption, whereby the Affordable Housing Trust Fund recommended budget was requested to be supplemented with an additional $2.5 million from the city's, what are known as the city's development accounts, which is an accumulation of several resources or special revenue funds that have resulted from land transactions and other activities through the city's Community Planning and Economic Development Department. As I recall from the actual requested recommendation as part of the adopted budget, the $2.5 million was earmarked, was not formally appropriated for the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, but rather was intended to be earmarked for utilization if there were appropriate projects that were brought forward that were it not for the contingency would otherwise not be funded. And as I understand from the items brought forth with this recommendation today, the immediate need would be approximately $900,000, with the future utilization would be approximately $1.6 million in 2016.
Okay, so then I guess my question is, why are we moving 2.5 from the contingency amount if we don't even have anticipated that amount to be utilized in 2016? So it seems to me that that is not what our budget action requested, and maybe I need to review that language. And I don't know if Mr. Clevenger has other comments. This does seem a little bit more about what was the budget action and what are we going to get to this year.
Mr. Clevenger, if you could join us, give us the CPED perspective on housing finance.
Council Chair, members of the committee, the idea was this year there was a few projects that came in that we deemed were too high in development costs, and that they were taking they had some opportunities to re-strengthen their application. So the request for that was that because the City Trust Fund is often a first source into projects, in that we often are the leader in city projects that we find are important, we took the opportunity to have them come back to us in a pipeline with a stronger application so that our money could be better spent. So instead of funding them now and having that conversation, we wanted them to strengthen their application before city money was into the projects.
So if I'm not mistaken, though, what Ms. Christensen said, that would take us up to 1.6. So we're using $900,000 of the contingency fund to fund the recommendations coming forward today in this item, then those additional projects would take us up to $1.6 million. No, I'm misunderstanding then so I need a better understanding, and maybe we need this in writing as well as a follow-up to this meeting. I would really like to know what's being proposed, what are the projects on tap, and if this entire 2.5 is anticipated to be utilized this year, knowing that we're just a little bit away from the end of this year.
Chair Quincy, Council Vice President Glidden, the action before you today seeks to appropriate the full $2.5 million with the understanding that $900,000 of those resources would be utilized in 15, and the remaining funds would be carried forward for future allocation pending the resubmission of the project applications, as Mr. Clevenger articulated.
Well, that's what I was trying to understand. was, I understood the 900,000. I'm asking how much these additional projects will utilize. And I guess I can see the theory to that. They came forward. You asked them to improve their proposals to the city. I think it's reasonable to think if they meet those requirements, we can see how the city helps leverage their projects. But
So another point maybe I should have made, all three of these projects are important projects to the city, but they are somewhat early in the process. So we felt that we would be able to partially fund them too. That's why we also felt comfortable requesting the 1.6, because that would allow us to interact and be a present part of that negotiation with other lenders and partners, and also be able to have an opportunity to strengthen those applications at the same time. We took it as an opportunity to position the city better in our conversations with the developers.
And so part of the reason you're not answering my question about how much is, or maybe I just didn't ask it in a clear enough way, I want to know, do we have an anticipation of how much? So if we are funding up to 900,000 of 2,500 today, and there's 3 additional projects that are left, are you telling me that those 3 projects alone would take $1.7 million?
Yes, we fully expect that we would fund that 1.6 on those next 3 projects if they met our requirements. They still have to come to us with an improved application. So there's no agreement with anyone that we would fund these. They still have to come to us, but we are asking for the opportunity to work with these partners to fund them, and at the opportunity that they do come back with a better application.
Okay. Well, I see there's others in queue. It's maybe one where I need some additional briefing outside of the committee process to understand this. So,
Look forward to that. Councilmember Bender.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I remember this discussion very clearly from the budget, and frankly was not a huge fan of using development fund dollars in a one-time way in the trust fund. I would prefer us to find a more sustainable source of trust fund dollars than moving money around in this way that is, been identified for other priorities. Why would we not then appropriate $1.6 million in 2016 if that's when the funds will be used?
Chair Quincy, Councilmember Bender, that discussion was held with the Community Development and Regulatory Services Committee, and with the pending projects, there was a recommendation to appropriate the full amount. The full amount would not necessarily need to be appropriated today because there isn't an ask to spend it. When the additional projects are brought forward for recommendation later in 2016, or at whatever time that they have met the criteria of the selection committee, those remaining funds could also be appropriated at that time. They aren't necessary to be appropriated for the purposes listed out in this particular action.
What would you like to do on that? Do you want to send it forward?
well, I'm not sure what's the crossover on this committee with community development.
Just me.
Just Councilmember Quincy. Sometimes we have a little bit more crossover with the committee.
Not on Ways and Means and CD.
CD, right? I guess I'll just note, I'm not sure that I have another recommendation right now on this, but I probably will abstain myself and maybe want to meet with Mr. Clevenger about this. I will tell you, I am kind of bothered about this item with the $2,500, and it seems like there's some additional information that maybe the Community Development Committee had that we haven't processed through here. And the issue too is just what's the source coming from, and that it is this development account, and that we have several pressures on that account too. So
I will comment, if I may.
Mm-hmm.
This was set up somewhat before my time, but as a contingency for this very action. It's not taking money away from any other source, but that it was directed towards the trust fund if it was deemed that we needed it. And we received over $15 million in applications this year. So we wanted to be the best steward of the little bit amount of money that we receive, as we got so many qualified applications, so that this money wasn't we're not asking for money to be moved around, but this was already money that was set aside for the trust fund as a contingency. We're just requesting it per our understanding that was how the money was set up to be requested.
Councilmember Bender.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. During that same discussion, we also moved $500,000 from CDBG money that was originally intended for single-family home rehabilitation and was moved into the trust fund. Is that funding reflected here as well in this contingency?
Councilmember Quincy, Councilmember Bender, the $2.5 million is in addition to the other reallocations that occurred as part of the markup process for the 15 budget.
Okay. Well, in light of that conversation, because I'm very comfortable with this action, having sat through some of the CD committee meetings, but as well as going through the Affordable Housing Trust Fund applications, I thought the committee did a really good job of identifying the projects that frankly weren't quite ready to go yet, whether they didn't have site control or other project readiness. But the role of these funds in many cases is, as you indicated, Mr. Clevenger, is to be that prime the pump with other funding and to leverage other funding, especially with MHFA. I think I'd like to move this forward with for approval, understanding that Council Vice President Glidden would be abstaining on this particular vote, and then seeing if we can have some more direct input from CPED as well as finance officers on whether we may need to make some technical amendments at the council meeting on Friday for this, and we'll wait for that action to come back when Councilmember Goodman is available. So with that, I'd like to move approval of this item. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. And opposed? And then one abstention. And two abstentions on that, Ms. Giesler. So thank you for that. Let's see, I think that leaves us to our next item. It's on a discussion item. I wonder if Ms. Siegel could join us. This is going to be for the Byrne Criminal Justice Innovation Grant acceptance. Normally, taking money is an easy thing for this committee to do, and $155,000 is terrific work. So I'm going to allow you to talk about why we should be taking this great fortune.
Mr. Chair and members of the committee, thank you so much for giving us a few minutes to talk about this grant. We are just so excited to embark on this work. It's going to be a lot of work, but I think it will hold a lot of promise. And so our office led the way, and Jennifer Saunders really did all the legwork, pulling, pushing, task mastering. Yes. To pull the grant proposal together. She's our third precinct community attorney. And I've got Robert Lilligren here who's going to talk a bit about Little Earth, former council vice president and executive director of Little Earth now for a year. So we have great partners. With this is a planning grant that we were awarded. There were only 15 of these awarded across the country. The city was awarded one a year ago, approximately, to dive into research, qualitative research, community engagement, and looking at the crime drivers in North Minneapolis in the violent crime hotspots. And by the end of this year, I believe they will be pulling together an implementation plan going forward to reduce the levels of violence in those hotspots. So we can learn from their experience over this last year and really focus in on Little Earth of United Tribes. And I'm going to have Robert talk a little bit about Little Earth, but it's a unique place in the nation. It is the only HUD subsidized Native American preference housing community in the country. It's in a defined area, so that presents exciting opportunities as well to make a difference. And it has approximately over 1,000 residents, and half of the residents of the community are kids, are under 21 years old. And Little Earth leadership is recognized nationally as being a leader in providing services for Native Americans. Little Earth, as we all know, has a number of challenges, and crime and violence have been just a persistent problem at Little Earth. In 2014, there were 17 shootings, numerous gang contacts. They were not immune from the heroin epidemic, and that's caused huge problems and tragic deaths and multiple overdoses, ongoing domestic violence, and there's a growing awareness of the issue of juvenile sex trafficking as we're all becoming more aware and proactive. And so this is a map that Minneapolis Police Department put together of violent crime hotspots in South Minneapolis. Little Earth, that area around Little Earth constitutes one of those. And if you see a little black line along the side of the Little Earth community there, that's Stately Street. And that one street segment has consistently over the last 25 years been the #1 spot for shootings in the city of Minneapolis. So there's just an ongoing issue. I'm going to let Robert talk a little more about it, Little Earth and the challenges, but it also has numerous strengths. And we have have had very strong partnership with Little Earth and its leadership. Not only the city of Minneapolis, the Minneapolis Police Department, our office, the Hennepin County Attorney's Office, Hennepin Human Services, et cetera. And there are a lot of strengths in the community. I mean, Little Earth itself was founded through Native American organizing and activism. So there's a lot of cause for hope. Already in place, we've been an active participant and helped manage the Court Watch program there. We've been active with domestic violence. There's an advocate present there. Hennepin County has the Omnichi program, and Little Earth itself invests over $250,000 a year just on safety and trying to keep the community safe. So this grant will allow us to dive in, see what's working, what's not, understand more about why, and really to work with a grassroots approach of community engagement. And so we're going to do all this in 18 months. We've got partners in place. And one of the most promising pieces of this project is that it includes a chunk of the funding will go to Little Earth to hire a position for a community safety champion and a community education coordinator. So it really will be a community-driven, community-led initiative, and Little Earth will own the research data, not the researchers, when all is said and done. It'll be their data. And I'm now going to turn it over to Mr. Lilligren.
Councilmember Lilligren. You get to have the title follow you until you get a higher office.
Yes, that's probably about as high as it's going to go. Mr. Chair, committee members, thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. And thanks to Ms. Siegel and especially Ms. Saunders for her work on this Burn Criminal Justice Innovation Program Planning Grant application. It was a lot of work to get this grant application in, and there's a lot of excitement in the Little Earth community and amongst our cross-sector partnership as well. So I thought I would just give a little background on Little Earth and then talk about the community activities around the grant and the capacity that we're building within Little Earth. And so Little Earth was built in 1973, and since, as Ms. Siegel indicated, it was built right out of the activism and organizing that Minneapolis was a hotbed for in the Native community in the 60s and 70s. And then in the early 90s, the same activism and activists organized and worked with the federal government and got the designation to allow Native preference in housing, and becoming the sole example of a HUD project-based Section 8 housing development in the country that provides preference to Native folks in housing. And consequently, 98-99% of our residents are Native people, and that brings a lot of strength to the community. As Ms. Siegel mentioned, they're incredibly resilient, industrious, entrepreneurial, community. And it also brings some challenges when you have a highly concentrated population that lives daily with the impacts of historical trauma, cultural trauma, early childhood exposure to violence, and those kinds of things. And as Ms. Siegel indicated, Little Earth is a national model. People look to Little Earth for how to address issues within the urban Indian community. And I think folks on this committee know that there are these cities throughout the country with these well-established Native populations due to federal worker relocation program of the last century. So cities like Denver, Seattle, Portland, Los Angeles, Albuquerque, all have these concentrated Native populations, but Minneapolis has the only Little Earth, and because of that, it really becomes sort of a laboratory for trying to find solutions particular to the urban Indian population. And Little Earth is taking a multifaceted approach to creating a safer community. And one thing that very much surprised me when I got to Little Earth just a year ago, just a little over a year ago, year and a week ago, was the lack of community organizational infrastructure to allow residents there to engage in positive change in their community. And when you consider the history of Little Earth and that it literally emerged from community activism, this was a big lack. And so through this last year, we've sought additional funds or redirected existing funds to better engage the community in positive change. One of those things was to create an employment program that educates residents in community organizing, preparing them to take entry-level community organizing positions within other organizations, but also teaching residents about community development and leadership. And this cadre of community leaders, they call themselves the community building team, has really taken the lead in organizing the community around a number of research projects and participatory action research projects. And this model is becoming very, very good for Little Earth in that it allows the residents to engage in the positive change in the community while studying the root causes of some of the challenges in the community. And it's really drawn a lot of attention nationally. Just this last weekend, a resident and staff person from Little Earth attended the National Public Health Professional Association convention in Chicago and presented on this methodology that we're using to improve conditions on Little Earth. So this grant and the work that we'll be able to do through this planning phase and hopefully on into implementation will just overlay very nicely with what we're already doing at Little Earth, and the point that we'll retain ownership of the data. And this is something that we put in place over the last 12 or 18 months with all of our research partners, and our data agreement allows for us in the community to retain the ownership. That gives much higher confidence for the community to participate in these research projects. There's sort of a history within the Native community broadly, and certainly Little Earth, of researchers sort of coming in and doing their research, taking their data away, and then the community never really knows what happened to it or how it had impact in their lives. And so this maintaining the ownership of the data through the projects is a cool and kind of new thing. And with our research partners, Hamline University, Metro State University, they are willingly embracing this model. And so I'm happy to answer any questions. This is incredibly needed in our community. I'm a Phillips guy. I've been a Phillips guy for 33 years. And in other parts of Phillips, we've seen significant and more or less permanent reductions in crime. We're actually preventing crime. At Little Earth, we haven't seen anywhere near the reductions we have in the rest of the Phillips area. And so my sense is with this grant award, we also received a small grant from the Neighborhood Community Relations Department to organize block clubs within Little Earth and putting those fundamental pieces of community policing infrastructure in place. I think that we will see sustained improvement in the lives of a number of people within the Little Earth community. So I'm happy to answer questions, and I thank you for your time and for all you do for the city.
Well, thank you very much, Councilmember. I was interested in the ownership of the research data, becoming as a research guy.
Sure.
I've always been intrigued by who owns the data and what is done with that information. By owning it, you have access to use it again in future years, as you'll be able to build on it make a longitudinal research data collection, and that should be a fascinating project.
Correct, Mr. Chair and committee members. And so not only will we have that data, as you said, in a longitudinal collection of data, but also if anyone else uses that data going forward, then Little Earth, of course, is as owner of the data, is part of any publication, presentation that data may be used for in the future. And we're already seeing that in some of the other work that we've done with other research partners. Papers are being published, dissertations are being published, and Little Earth, the Little Earth name and the Little Earth participation carries on into the future.
Very good. Council Vice President.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Well, I just wanted to say congratulations. I know that the city is very excited about this partnership, and I know I heard from Susan when you learned of the award, and she was just very excited about this opportunity to work even more deeply together with Little Earth. I think it's interesting that this is the innovation program, and Little Earth is such an innovative model. And so it's going to be interesting how this pans out. The other thing I will say is I had not realized until kind of hearing from you that the kind of capacity building around organizing efforts and just had not happened within the community there. And so I think this is a real opportunity to see what more targeted investment, where the community owns the products that will come from that, how that ends up affecting what may be sort of hopefully some systemic models for change.
Right.
So
thank you. Mr. Council Vice President Glidden, I sent around a clip of a video to the committee members that was taken and produced by the 3rd Precinct, and it was in response to a recent shooting incident at Little Earth, and working with Inspector Sullivan of the 3rd Precinct, who is very eager to build better relationships into the Little Earth community. He brought 10 officers who went door to door in an organized effort that was really